Excerpt from the logbook of Captain Yok Bendo, commander of the FST Nébia, one of the sturdiest ice freighters in the system. In the cockpit, the voice of the orbital station's flight controller echoed in his ears. After finishing with air traffic control and the flight instructions, he was surprised by an unexpected presence. It was the mouse, Soha Riga, the ship's mechanic and younger sister of Kenta Riga, their current navigator, but more importantly, their former leader. He had to be partially integrated into the ship's systems to survive after the series incident. She appeared behind Yok while the entire crew was supposed to be in their biogil pods, designed to protect them during interplanetary travel.
Captain, we need to talk about Kenta.
After a short argument with her about her brother's condition, who is now more machine than man, he finally sent her back to her quarters before ordering Kenta to set their course on the Icarus vector towards the neutral zone around the Veil. In his journal, Captain Yok Bendo briefly reflects on his childhood and his meeting with Kenta and the mouse. All three originated from the gloomy corridors of an old station orbiting Ganymede. Kenta Riga, the current navigator of the Nébia and former leader of the Rukia crew, their very first ship. He met Yok when they were just kids. Young Yok had stolen several protein bars from the market, and the two merchants had already caught him. He was getting seriously beaten up when they decided to throw him out an airlock into the vacuum of space, claiming they were doing society a favor by getting rid of a parasite like him. Yok really thought he was going to die, but out of nowhere, Kenta showed up. He was a pretty tough kid for someone raised in microgravity. He must have received growth rings when he was younger, proof that he wasn't always a kid from the ducks. He had this little girl around his neck. She must have been, what, 3 years old? 4? Tops? She was so small she would slip under his suit like a tiny animal. That's why Yok always called her the mouse, which didn't stop Kenta from literally smashing the two merchants' heads together before they ended up in the vacuum of space themselves. After that, Kenta invited him to eat, and the three of them became inseparable. They grew up continuing their little rascal ways, avoiding trouble, relying only on themselves. As much as Kenta was strong and wise, the mouse was a real whiz kid, repairing and tinkering with everything she could find. On the other hand, she was always a real pain, unbearable. Then, still in his journal, Captain Yok will tell how they met Carl Sagan when they enlisted after the first uprisings in the 5th incursion conflict. Carl was always an exceptional pilot, incredibly lucky. He also had a reputation for being as lucky as he was crazy and for never bringing his crews back alive, although he always got out unscathed, hence his nickname, the Jinx. Nobody wanted to fly with him anymore, except Kenta. Really good at reaching his targets, much less so at bringing back his ship or his companions. So nobody wanted to fly with him anymore, even though he was still the best in his field. Even though Carl was their superior officer, their pilot, and their expert in long-range communication and detection, it was always Kenta who gave the orders. And Carl never really had a problem with that. Maybe that's what kept them alive during the entire 5th incursion conflict. After the war, Carl joined them and found them an old gunship cargo vessel that was barely airworthy, the Rukia. They spent months fixing up that thing. Because of the weapons ban imposed by the order that had just taken power, they had to get rid of the main turret. They kept the secondary one though, just in case. The mouse is smart when she wants to be. She disguised the cannons as dummy inertial converters. She modified the whole ship, turning it into a small freight and personnel transport shuttle. But with such an insignificant payload capacity and limited range, they didn't find many clients. Not enough to make a living anyway. So they became pirates, or rather, scavengers, stripping the wrecks of ice freighters and their crews who had the bad idea of dying in the middle of nowhere. It's true that they also sometimes robbed consensus drilling equipment depots, but most were abandoned or offered no resistance, and even with that, it wasn't enough. So Carl found them a job. A super simple plan. He managed to get the security code from a guard at one of the salt storage complexes on Ceres, which belonged to the corporations. After the fall of the consensus, the order took over everything. With these codes, the Rukia would have no problem crossing the no-fly zone protecting the complex. After that, all they had to do was take what they could and leave. And everything went exactly as planned. But as they were leaving the salt depot, a Titan interceptor started chasing them. They managed to shoot it down, but they had to chase the pilot on the ground before she could report them. After catching her, Carl took care of her relentlessly. Was it really a woman? Anyway, without her mask, she looked like one. And then, out of nowhere, a second Titan, the smallest and most ridiculous one they had ever seen. It faced them, hesitant. Then, when it fired, Kenta jumped on Yok to protect him. He had saved his life once again. However, half of his body was disintegrated in the explosion, and even though his sister did everything she could to keep him alive, he wasn't going to make it, or he would never be the same again. This event, unknowingly, had just sealed everyone's fate. The young Titan, having just witnessed the death of its matriarch, its mentor, and that of the entire crew, starting with Kenta. Without care, he wouldn't survive long. They needed to quickly find a station or a ship with a decent medical bay. They needed at least an ice freighter equipped with the latest medical equipment and updates, a Class 3 at minimum. A ship like the Nébia. And there was only one place to find one.